Welcome to 56-Bit Cloud Cafe, your go-to destination for all tech topics in the cloud. I'm Atir Zalat.
And I'm Patrick Camilleri. And together we'll be addressing various cloud topics.
Hello everyone and welcome back to our ECS series. In this episode, we will explore the intricacies of managing ECS clusters and defining tasks for containerized applications. So let's start. In our previous conversation, we talked about how good of a service ECS is. Today, I'd like us to know how do you set up and manage ECS clusters.
So setting up an ECS cluster is pretty straightforward. You basically have to go into the AWS console. You define, you go to the region that you wish to have your cluster running in, the physical location, the region, because this is a region-based service. And in there, inside ECS, in that specific region, you create a new cluster, which will allow you to set the desired instance types, the network configuration, the VPC that you want to connect to. You might also need to create security groups, which are like firewalls, basically allowing certain ports that can be incoming or outgoing from that cluster. Once you set this up, ECS will provision the appropriate instances for that cluster. It will give you the ability to create other components like services, task definitions, etc., which we'll speak about. But ultimately, it's a very straightforward process. And as always, creating and managing AWS services can be done through the console, as we've said, but it can also be done through the CLI, can be done through SDKs from a software point of view. You can use Terraform or CloudFormation. The management will then include all the changes you might want to do to the configuration, things like launching tasks, scaling resources, changing configurations, viewing health metrics. So all these things are pretty straightforward. There is an AWS API under the hood, and you can access that whichever method you wish to do so.
Okay, perfect. Now, in a closer look at the components, there is a task definitions. What are they and how do they work?
Right, so task definitions you can think of them like a recipe, right? So you want to have something to eat, you start off from a recipe. That recipe is how you are going to create that dish. You can create as many dishes as you want from that same recipe, but it's the instructions for that specific dish. It's a blueprint. It specifies details like the container image to use and where you can find it, whether you find it in ECR or in other private or public registries. You can define the memory to use, the CPU requirements, the storage that you want to create with every container, the environment variables that you want to add to a running container. All these things are definitions in a specific format, in a file, that can be ultimately used to create as many containers as you wish from the task definition.
Another core topic under ECS is the service. Can you explain the concept of ECS services and how they relate to tasks?
Yes, sure. So ECS services are a concept where you can group multiple containers together into a service. And the service allows you to configure and maintain a specific state for your application. So it uses a specific task definition that you might have created, and that task definition is used to launch and maintain a number of tasks. In Kubernetes, we call them pods. Anyways, but these tasks have containers, one or more containers in them. Usually one, but you might have multiples. Now, these tasks run together as a single entity known as a service, and they run on top of the EC2 or Fargate cluster. The advantage of having these tasks grouped together as a service is that you can maintain a specific state for that application. So things like auto-scaling. I want a minimum of 30 tasks, 30 copies of that application running, and I want you to increase it by 1 task every 5 minutes for a maximum of 100 containers, depending on the load that is coming in. I want you to load balance between the different tasks in that service. All these things can be configured at a service level.
Making all the components communicate seamlessly falls under this question now. How do you configure networking and load balancing for ECS containers?
ECS offers various options here when it comes to container networking. You can leverage Amazon VPC to make sure that your containers are isolated. When I say containers, I also mean the tasks themselves that contain those containers. They are isolated in a private network, in a virtual private network, VPC. You can have rules that allow certain traffic to go out and come in from the public networks, from the internet, but by default, it's going to be private. For load balancing, it is suggested to use something like elastic load balancing, ELB. There are 2 types here, which we've spoken in previous episodes about. There is the network load balancer and the application load balancers. And these can distribute traffic inside a specific service or across services based on the tasks that you have running. These things together, the networking part as well as the load balancing part, help you maintain a set of instances across different physical locations to give you reliability. They help you maintain a large number of tasks and distribute traffic across them, which helps with speed, and ultimately help you maintain security, because a load balancer acts as the edge firewall, let's say, if you set it up correctly, in terms of security, allowing traffic in and out. There are other methods that you can use, like mesh networking, which have their own advantages and disadvantages, but probably as a starting point, using an ELB, a load balancer, would be great to use with ECS.
Thank you for joining us for this episode today. In our next one, we will discuss container orchestration with ECS and explore scaling and monitoring strategies. Until then, happy cloud computing!
If you have questions, suggestions, or want to share your feedback, connect with us on social media.
Also, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and to leave us a review to help others find their way to the Cloud Cafe.